Yeah, mine said the June. Gosh, okay, the 11th and 12th. Actually, do not know. Oh, it's right in front of me, 11th. So it's been one of those days. So with that, we have our roll call.
Board Member Taft.
Here.
Board Member Fiscal. Board Member Farm.
Here.
Board Member Feedy. Here. Board Member Miller.
Here.
Board Member Hood.
Here.
Board Member Venus.
Here.
Board Member Martinez. Here. Chair Shane.
Here. All right, and with that, we will move on to the flag salute. I'd like to ask Member John Loder if you would get us in the pledge.
Yeah.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America,
To the republic.
which stands one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, John. And with that, now any public comment?
We don't have any.
Okay. All right, with that, we will move on to agenda item 1. This is the CEA update.
Good afternoon. I'm Caitlin McGee, Senior Key Accounts and Program Manager. On item 1, I would love to kick this meeting off by introducing our new employees here at Clean Energy Alliance. We have 6 new employees who are here in person, just so you can familiarize yourselves with them. They started on May 19th. So first, I'd like to introduce Natalie Aguilar. She is a program specialist. She'll be working on our equitable building decarbonization grant. Next is Jacqueline Orjay Berg, also joining us as a programs analyst with a focus in distributed energy resources. And then Christina Berg, who is our finance manager with lots of experience in public finance and budget. Kieran Cruz, our energy contracts and compliance analyst, who also previously worked with us as a consultant a few years ago. And then Leah Callie, Michelle Silva, regulatory and legislative affairs analyst, joining us also from another CCA up north. Great CCA experience. And then Teresa Tarami, joining as an account services and data analyst, also joining us from a company we work with as a consultant on the billing and office side. Another great clap for them. Okay, back to our regular updates. So CEA enrollment stats remain steady, participation is at 93%, and maintaining our overall active customer count of about 255,000 customers. We have been busy out in the community. So as you know, April is Earth Month. There were lots of events throughout our service territory. Here is a list of those that we participated from April, mid-April to today's date. And then upcoming events. It doesn't quite slow down after Earth Month. Here are a list of the upcoming events throughout our service territory through August. This is just what we have on the calendar for now. Just want to point out we are organizing a tour to the San Jose power plant here in the next. And then last month, this is a piece of the rate relief credit item that the board took action on earlier this year. We put together a communications plan on how to get the word out about the rate relief credit, ways to save on your bills. So our staff hosted a webinar on May 21st. We hosted this webinar both in English and Spanish with the goal of helping customers understand their bill, learn about ways to save on their bill, information about time of use pricing, and a bunch of other resources. So the recordings of those webinars are available on our YouTube site, and there are the QR codes. Just an update on our program participation on the Solar Plus and battery bonus side. Our program participation is continuing to hold pretty steady on the Connect programs, considering the funding from the self-generation incentive program is mostly spoken for at the moment. We are still accepting waitlist applications for the Connect programs. And then we do see a slight increase in signups for the Solar Plus program here. We have a bit more detail on the Connect programs that are funded from the self-generation incentive program. Not much to update you here on since the last meeting, since funding is kind of at a standstill. And then our Peak Smart Savers program, which is a great time to sign up for this program when we head into the summer season. We expect most of our event days related to this program will happen in the next few months. And also the bill protection component of this program will be expiring at the end of this year. So a short window to sign up and try it out for free. But our participation here also holds steady, not any major movement since our last update. And then also an update on our rate relief credit. So customers who do opt down to our clean impact product can benefit from the rate relief credit, which was designed to achieve rate parity or slight cost savings for the average customer, depending on your PCIA vintage. So we do see residential folks, customers taking advantage of this credit option. And I think we've added one commercial customer to the rate relief credit selection as well. And then I do want to highlight Clean Energy Alliance's 5-year anniversary, which just passed in the month of May. So we were celebrating 5 years since we first started serving load as a CEA. We held a celebration and educational event at the Agua Hedionda Lagoon Discovery Center on May 28th, following our last board meeting. There were almost 80 attendees. We also had a nice short program where we got to recognize our Green Impact champions. A few of you here pictured on the slide. And then we also published a 5-year impact report. The 5-year impact report was presented to the board on May 28th, but it's also listed on our website under the key documents page, so it can be found there. But I want to just quickly summarize some of the key accomplishments and statistics that Clean Energy Alliance has been able to achieve just in its 5 years of serving load. So great participation numbers. We've held pretty steady around the 95 participation rate there. We estimated that as a program, we've reduced 746,000 metric tons of CO2 equivalent and GHG reductions from our launch to 2024. And you'll see a lot of these statistics are referencing through 2024 just because of the available data at the time. And we'll continue to update this in the future. We've also made investments in Clean Energy Future. So over $750 million committed to new build renewable energy projects. And also advocating for our customers. So we've filed over 130 filings with the CPUC advocating on behalf of CPA customers. And I'll just summarize some of these, but we've also focused on bridging the gap to clean energy. So through our program, we've installed or have pending 398 kilowatts of solar and battery systems, and then about 1,300 kilowatt hours of installed or pending battery storage. Also, planning for community reinvestment in fiscal year 24-25. CPA reached a net positive position. And by the end of fiscal year 25-26, estimated a net position of $79 million and 107 days of liquidity on hand, which is quite an achievement. And lastly, focusing on connecting with our communities. So since we began tracking community events, we estimate we've engaged over 7,300 people at these community events, invested over $78,000 in sponsorships with local organizations, and also since launch have answered 36,000 customer support calls. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Before we get started with the questions, I just want to remind everyone who you are asking for our public, if you look at our screen up there with little dots on the camera, say your name and then city you represent, and then your question. And make sure you use the mic so you can record it on the online video version. Are there any questions? Question? Okay, we will move on to another.
Okay, I want to let you know, we have a request for public comment that has already passed. If you recognize that or let me know it's passed.
I think since we made the effort to be here, we'll accommodate it, and there are no questions on this particular item from the committee, so if you would like to get that podium line so they can speak on the podium, so they get recorded, okay? So I don't have his name. Okay. And are you gonna give me instructions on how long and all that? Okay, I know, but we have others to let you know, so it's usually 3 minutes. I just wanted to do it after. Okay.
Jeffrey Ankagi.
Okay, hold it. I think I'm all right. Okay. Good afternoon. My name is Jeffrey Brancati. I've owned my home at 2884 Woodridge Circle in Carlsbad for the past 28 years. I was one of the first sign-ons to CEA, Clean Energy Program. My primary motivation in doing so was to do what I could for clean air. And if I could lower my monthly utility bill a bit, so much the better. The process for getting the solar system installed was initially chaotic. It took about 8 months, start to finish. This was supposedly understandable. It was, after all, a new program, and the various parties to it had to coordinate with each other. Since then, however, I've been both dissatisfied and disappointed in CEA. On several occasions, I've called CEA and have never received an explanation of my bill that makes sense. The last time was last week, and Juliana was helpless to explain the details of the program. When I signed onto the program, I thought the $115 a month lease for the Powerwall was excessive, but accepted it, thinking there would be savings in other parts of the bill. However, since day one of participating in the program, CEA has been billing me 14.5 cents per kilowatt hour not for electricity that I'm using in my home, but for every kilowatt hour that I am generating on my roof. The latest bill charges me for generating 859.72 kilowatt hours, far more than I use at home. However, the same bill lists my electric usage at 67 kilowatt hours. What I can't stress enough is that nobody at CEA ever told me in plain English that I will be billed 14.5 cents, not for the kilowatt hours that I used, but for the kilowatt hours generated by the panels on my roof. Who in their right mind would accept those conditions for participation? All of those excess kilowatt hours are being paid for twice, first by me, then by whoever CEA is selling the excess to. I've given the CEA the use of my roof to implement this program. My last monthly SDG&E bill was $297.33, all but $32.47 of which was for the cost of electricity. My experience so far strongly suggests that if it is the goal of CEA to achieve widespread adoption of their program, CEA will have to make the program more attractive to participants. My two recommendations: do something about the price of the Powerwall and bill based on actual usage in the home, not the total power generated by the solar system.
Thank you.
I have copies of my bill if anyone needs it, with the latest bill and I have other copies. I have other copies of bills going back 6 months. I have a copy of the statement too.
Okay, I'm gonna make a suggestion. You leave your name and phone number and any materials that you want to share, like your billing copies or whatever,
Of
so
course.
somebody can reach out to you.
Mhm.
And Anna, right here, you can do that with her, and that would be very helpful.
Good.
All right? Thank you. All right, we're gonna move on to item number 2.
You don't have any.
All right.
Hello, Andy. My name is Andy Stern. I'm the CFO, Chief Financial Officer for CDA. Haven't met some of you before, but glad to be here. I presented this same presentation to the board at the May 28th meeting, I think. But I wanted to present that to you all and give you a chance to weigh in or ask questions or understand that. So this was the timeline we presented to the board on May 28th with actual financial results through February 28th. And then today's meeting with the same results through February 28th. We also have a meeting scheduled with the full board on June 25th, which will have actual financial results. It says through March or April, but it will be through April since we were caught up to that. It does change the ending balances and the starting for the following year. And there is a slight differential, but it's not that material. I apologize that this is so small, but hopefully you can read it, and I'm happy to talk through any details. The left 3 columns are the year-to-date, which is actuals through February 28th, and then budget that was through February 28th, and then the variance, both favorable or unfavorable. If it's got parentheses around it, an unfavorable balance. And then the last 3 columns are the full year forecast full year budget, and then again, variance for that. Highlighted in yellow, about 2/3 of the way down, is the change in net position. So we had roughly 53.7 million actuals through the end of February against a budget of 35 or so million. So we were $19 million favorable through the end of February. And I'll talk a little bit about why on the next slide. And the forecast for the year is to be at 58 million. And for the full year through June, which at this point was 4 months from this date, with a budget of 35 million, so $22 million favorable for the full year. Any questions on that before I talk a little bit about what happened? Sure.
I just have one, really, going back to the slide before that. So the actuals only go through April 2025 or the 20.
No, that is an error. So all those 2025 should be 2026.
Wow.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
And you win the prize.
Do I win a prize? I'll tell you, I was sitting here and nobody said anything.
Well,
Okay.
the full board didn't say me either, and it's the same slide, so.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, well, just for clarity, we're talking about those, everything on April 25.
Yes, I'm sorry about that. A good catch. That's a big error. Sorry about that. Multiple times. Any more questions on this slide? All right. So some of the observations for the full year, as I mentioned, the current forecast at the end of the year with change in net assets of a positive 58 million, which is 22 million above budget. And the end of the year with $79.6 million of net position. Caitlin mentioned that in the last presentation, with the days liquidity on hand of 107 versus a budget 81. Revenues are expected to be slightly below budget, 6 million or 1.6%. It's actually current forecast is to be slightly closer than that, but still slightly below budget. Energy expenses are forecast to be roughly 25 million below budget. Some components of the energy costs, and there are about 8 components that we track. Some are above budget and some are below budget. However, we had budgeted a $25 or so million contingency, which was mostly not needed in this year as prices have stayed unusually low this past year. So that allows us to be well below budget and to achieve our objectives for financial stability much sooner than we, or look like we can achieve them much sooner than we had been expecting last year. Forecast of other expenses are forecast to be 2.2 million below budget, about 3%. And the biggest underachievement or below budget is program expenses. As you know, Caitlin and her group have been working diligently on building programs, but we had budgeted $2 million for spending this year, and they really haven't gotten off the ground to any substantial levels for us in terms of spending. So now, before I move to the next year's budget detail, any questions on last year's?
And I just had one clarifying, but I might have missed it because I was taking notes. The revenue slightly below budget. What was your, were you going to go through what your explanation?
I wasn't going to go through that, but I'm happy to respond. Usage is slightly below what we had forecasted. We believe that we have also seen them or the solar adoption be higher than we expected as well in this territory. It surprised are the people that have done our forecasting, both internal and external. And as a result, we would have expect to have lower usage or lower generation, despite what the previous speaker said. We would have lower generation and therefore lower bills to bill customers. So not surprising that those go a little bit hand in hand. Again, also 1.6% off relative to an expectation of $380 million is just not that much money. And we're actually pretty close when your budget expecting $380 million.
I mean, it's just budget versus actual. But I was just curious what the,
That's our belief about, that it's, that usage is slightly below what we expected. And we have, in our forecast for the coming year and in the year after, we have tried to account for that continued lower than it had been expected, but we could be surprised again on that.
We have another question?
Yeah, just a clarification on that 25 million. Say we haven't used, if I remember correctly, that was, we were budgeting for the opt-downs, figuring we'd have a lot more people that would opt down.
That's a very different, thing. This, first of all, this contingency had been budgeted before we adopted the opt-down program. But that was, and what the opt-down program would do if people did adopt at any substantial level, and we haven't seen that, that would be reducing revenues more than we saw. What the contingency did was to assume their costs on the cost side for energy would be higher than we expected. And the reason for that is the prior year, we saw costs, RA cost and rec cost and entry costs actually skyrocket in the prior 12 months prior to this bill. And in order to, because energy costs can be quite volatile, we have been surprised at how low they've been for as long as they've been. And personally, I'm nervous that they can't stay that low that long, but I've been surprised at how long they stayed that low. We budgeted for more costs in this year than we needed because they have stayed as low as they've stayed for as long as they have. We are in this budget proposal, you'll see we are assuming and hold the board and assuming that we would like to include a contingency again, because the risk of missing cost projections on the upside from a cost standpoint, or sorry, from higher costs is high. The risk is very high to a municipal agency. If we're below cost, I mean, our budgeting was wrong or contingency wasn't needed, but there's no downside to us being missing on the downside. It's being, unless our costs go or volatile up, that's a real risk to a municipal agency, and we don't want to be surprised by that.
Yeah, I think you guys were adding that contingency for the next 4 or 5 years.
Yes.
Just to be proactive.
Yes, that's right. To be conservative, we're assuming that although the board is not, the presentation here, even though we'll show you a 5-year plan, the board's only approving a 1-year budget. So even though we're showing the expectation of the contingency for the next few years, it's only being approved for 1 year at this point. And there's a similar question about the contingency at the board. If we see costs continue to stay low for another year or two, then we may, in fact, probably would come and maybe propose a smaller contingency in the upcoming years. I've been doing this for a while and I've seen costs be very volatile year over year. This year has been a surprise for me and a surprise to others that they stayed as low as they have. Wasn't a surprise, but a surprise nonetheless. Sure.
They've been reading the information on, I thought on the website when it compared the SDG&E bills to CEA, that the generation price was lower for SDG&E. Does that reflect contracts, long-term contracts that you have, or why is it kind of, so I'm reading that correctly?
Yes. You may be, first of all, SDG&E has one price that they publish. We have 3 prices that we publish, and we have adjusted our rates to be consistent with SDG&E's rates at the lowest level, our lowest rate class. On the other ones, we are slightly higher, that's true. And it does reflect costs, however, but it also, in SDG&E's case, it reflects cost of purchasing energy plus their built-in profit that they need to make to satisfy investors. In our case, we are looking conservatively to build reserves. 2 years ago, we had a negative, equity or negative net position. You can't exist as an organization for very long with a negative net position, so we're in the process of building up reserves so that we have a long-term financial stability. In addition, as I've mentioned to the board a few times, and happy to go through as much detail as you need here, we're trying, Caitlin mentioned days liquidity on hand. We're trying to build our days liquidity on hand to a level that will allow us to get to a investment grade credit rating. Typically, those are somewhere around at least 150 to 200 on a sustainable basis. We're not at that level yet. We do expect to get to that level in 12 to 15 months or around then, maybe 18 months. However, getting to a level that will allow us to get an investment grade credit rating will enable a few other things. One, it will allow us to lower rates at CDA. Two, it will allow us to negotiate better terms with energy suppliers. Right now, we're competing for energy with entities and other CCAs who have investment grade credit ratings and have a leg up on that. Third, it not just negotiate better terms, but also opens up other energy suppliers that right now wouldn't want to contract with us without an investment grade credit rating. So we're purposely building reserves to get to that level as soon as we can. As I've mentioned to the board before, we're making $58 million this year. If we lowered our rates substantially, we would make less, and maybe we could even, still be positive, but it would postpone like the period of time when we could get to that investment grade credit rating by 2 or maybe even 3 years. And we're trying to get there and then evaluate the option to lower rates. Sure. Great. It's not advancing. Okay. So some key assumptions that are in the upcoming budget. We are assuming no change in rates to your question that we just had from the current levels, maintaining those for the next year and for the next 5 years in the projection. As I said, they're just assumptions right now. The board can always adjust rates at any time. It has that authority. But at this point, from a budgeting standpoint, we're assuming no. At that point, Cal CCA, great projections, so the potential for significant rate decrease by SDG next year. If that happened, and SDG, these rates are very hard to predict and they change regularly. But if that happened, we would be actually potentially more than SDG, more of a differential. That might be a reason to consider lowering rates and maybe extending the time when we want to get to an investment grade credit rating. And I mentioned a revised load forecast at this point was in process, and it could have an impact on revenue forecast. We have finished our load forecast, and I incorporated into the slides that I will present to the board in 2 weeks, and there's not a significant differential in the revenue forecast. But that wasn't the case when these slides were put together. The revenues are assumed an $800,000 a month of rate credit per month. That was a question a few minutes ago about the opt-downs. Because customers could still opt down as part of that program, we have built in that assumption for conservatism. However, we think very low likelihood we'll need anywhere near that because we budgeted potentially tens of thousands of people that might opt down, and we've seen, as you saw in those earlier slides, 148 people have opted down. So that is likely just a significant upside in revenues next year. I mentioned it doesn't reflect the load forecast, but that hasn't had a big impact. And the other significant note on the revenue side is that the current forecast or the prior forecast assumed a significantly lower green premium upcharge than we're actually seeing. So we built that in as, again, another level of conservatism in the budget. The reason we build in conservatism in the budget is because we don't want to be surprised on the downside. We're okay with, I believe we're okay with positive upsides or surprises, but not the negative ones. We've built in no load growth into the customer base. Typically, load growth can be 0.1 to 0.5%, sometimes by demographic growth in the territory and or more usage. We're not seeing lots of demographic growth in this territory, but that doesn't mean that it wouldn't happen. And our programs budget, as I mentioned in the prior year, we assumed we spent $2 million in the current year, or in the year we're in, but we're not going to be spent anywhere near that. We revised our way of looking at programs budget and built a stair step into the level of getting to be 3% of revenues at the end of 5 years. That would, and using an assumption of $500,000. So last year's budget was 2 million. This year's budget is only $500,000, which is 0.3% of revenues. And we will stair step into that level of 3% over the next 5 years. Any questions?
Question about the program. I don't know if it's in here, but I'm just wondering, in terms of overhead, is there a formula for a CEA this size on how much administration versus, right? Like if you have 45 employees, but your only revenue is nothing. I know what it is for school districts. I just don't know what it is.
Administration expenses or program administration?
I'm talking about like overhead that's involved in salary.
Yeah, there's not a target or best practice. We do look at other CCAs and what they are at. Our percentage for administration is well below the average of other CCAs at this point. Part of that is because we're new and we just added we added 6 new employees, which basically increased our load by 50%. So we haven't we haven't grown as much as other CCAs. And another thing about other CCAs is they often have a very large programs department because of I think I'm being recorded, so be careful what I say. I don't know. I think some of them are not as conservative about hiring as I think they should be. I was at one of those 4 years ago before I joined CEA. And we haven't had yet built up our programs haven't rolled out to the level yet that they require a lot of administration yet. So we may find ourselves growing, for example, the programs administration budget, the program administration staff at some later date. But at this point, we're well below the average.
Yeah, and I'm thinking about Anne's question about the rate, the idea that you're trying to get the rates down, but you're also trying to get your credit rating up and your liquidity. But also we're growing on the other side, right? So we're adding an amount of expenses that have to be covered by, the rates that we're charging our customers. And I haven't ever grown a CEA or been part of it. And I'm just wondering what that normal pathway is to get that growth in liquidity when you're still growing and you're really young and trying to, add programs, add people, add buildings, add whatever it is that you're adding.
Yeah, it's a good question. CEA is a business that is not like most public agencies. Okay, like very many at all. Very few public agencies. They're really more like CCAs. School districts, and I worked for a school district for a while in my career. Staffing is the key cost that impacts all kinds of expenses. At CEA and like other CCAs, 95% of the expenses is energy expenses. So if we increase staff, even if we double the staff, we're making very little impact on the total expense base of what happens at CEA. It's really energy costs that drive, and the assumption of energy costs that drives rates. Right now, our rates are higher than SDG&E, not significantly, but they definitely are slightly higher. But that is way much more, you know what I mean? That I came up with better grammar to say it, way more,
You worked at school district.
more related to our objective of building financial sustainability and stability and our credit rating than it is, or because of adding staff. It's
Or anything,
making
like
their,
staff
of
building.
adding anything except energy expenses is really the only thing that really drives rates.
The other.
Thanks for the presentation, Andy. I have a question on the no load growth, and you may not be able to answer this. Somebody else can. Is when, oh, by the way, Aaron Dominguez from Oceanside. When Oceanside joined, or the CEA or all the other cities, everybody was opted into the CEA. I believe that's the state law. They opted them in. But I was just at a couple of council meetings, SB 79, expected to increase a lot of housing. And so the new buildings coming in are transit stuff. Numbers were insignificant. So my question is, at the initial stage when the city joined, everybody was opted in. But now you got all these people moving into this new housing. There, I would imagine, I did it when I moved in. I called SDG&E and I said I need a connection. You know, I was not aware of anybody else. So what happens to these new customers when they come in and they don't call CEA, they call SDG&E? Okay. SDG going to refer them to the CEA? That's what I'm asking about. The numbers assume the usage is flat, but the housing and population of things are.
Yes, so a couple of parts to that. First is, we're not assuming any load growth from a revenue standpoint. So to the extent that we have three things that I can remember them all. We're not assuming any load growth on the revenue side. So part of it is just to be conservative. So to the extent that we have more load growth on the revenue side, that will be an upside to our budget. So we would more easily make the budget. It's not completely clear on the no load growth because we have built in some load growth on the expense side. Because we don't want to be surprised that costs are higher than we expected. So, you're right. We might, we expect that there probably will be some load growth, although it's going to take some time before those housing units to be built and for people to move in. And the third point, when people call us, have a new house and they call SDG&E for service, SDG&E automatically enrolls them in CEA or SDCP unless they request the opt-out. So by SDG&E is part of the relationship and service that they provide to CCAs, similar to other IOUs, PG&E and SCE, same thing. They're obligated to enroll all the new customers into the CCA, the applicable CCA for that where the person's living, unless the customer specifically opts out, and then they're part of SDG&E's territory.
Thank you. That answers my question.
Sure.
And just one quick one, John Mosier, San Marcos. Under revenues, your second line down doesn't reflect revised load forecast the PEA is doing. What is PEA?
Oh, sorry. PEA is Pacific Energy Advisors. They have been, for the last 4 years or whatever, almost 5 years of our life, have been our outside consultant that did power supply contracting, power supply management, load for their outside consultant. They provide services to a number of CCAs, load forecasting, and other ancillary services. In the last year, we have been hiring some of our own staff. We have 4 members, and we actually are transitioning to take on 80% of what they do as of July 1. We're not terminating our relationship fully with them. However, most of the load forecasting and really the ongoing activities related to managing our power supply, we're taking on internally now with our current staff. It's similar to what other CCAs have done as well. They started up with PEA and then they transitioned to an internal staff as they hire the staff and build up our own internal data systems, our own tracking systems, our own forecasting systems, and our own experience to be able to do that. Okay, any other questions? Okay. Back to staffing. Today we're at 11 positions as of, I'm sorry, slide is out of date. How we had replaced this one. Today we are at 17 positions, and as of June 30th, we expect to be at 17 positions. We're not going to reduce, we're not planning to reduce one from the 17 to 16. As of June 30th, 2027, we expect to be at 21 positions. So that's, this slide is out of date, and I apologize for that. We have 4 new positions. It assumed in our budget year, they have not been approved by the board yet, but at some point when we're ready to do that, we will go to the board for approval. One is a rates specialist, and an HR, either part-time or full-time, and then 2 other employees that haven't yet been determined what they might be. But again, they're not, even though they're built into the budget and assumed in the expenses, we have not necessarily figured out and had approval to hire any of these positions yet. On the energy cost side, I mentioned the contingency that's built in that adds up to $25 to $28 million a year, depending on the year. 10% is the number, so it depends on the baseline, what that adds up to. On the NEM side, which is solar, people with solar, we're assuming 20% growth in the coming fiscal year over the estimate this fiscal year. In FY25, we saw 40% growth. Part of that is because we added new territories. 26 growth is forecasted to grow at 40% over last year's expenses. So that has continued to be quite a bit of solar adoption in our territory. Although we are assuming that will start to slow down. And for the remaining 3 years of the 5-year plan, we assume 10% growth. We could be surprised that it continues to grow at a higher level than the 20% that we're assuming. If we are, we'll adjust, but that's part of what the contingency is intended to cover, to the extent that we have more growth or more expense than we. Other observations on the energy cost side, RA, we're still witnessing some of the impact of having bought RA 2 years ahead. We're obligated to buy RA 2 years ahead when prices were high, and we're still impacted by having paid for that RA 2 years in advance, that's still flowing into the current fiscal year. Base energy costs are similar because we try to buy energy, some of our energy, 1, 2, 3, and sometimes 4 years in advance, so that we're not surprised. Prices were very high 18 to 24 months ago, and we're still being impacted by some of that. We didn't buy all of our energy, but we might have bought 10 or 15 or 20% of it 2 years ago, and we're still impacted by those higher prices. And RECs are expected to be higher in FY27 and 28 as we continue to raise our level of renewable energy percentage at CEA from calendar year 26 is assumed to be at 55%. Calendar year 27 is 60%, and then it grows and assumed to be at 90% by the time we get to calendar year 31. And then we're gonna see a jump in costs from the Darden project that's gonna come online in FY 29. Without, again, it's a lot of numbers here, but you'll see some of those costs reflected in the energy costs. In fact, for the current year, or that column, FY 26, you see $308 million of total cost of energy is the forecast. The FY 27, the second column, is budgeted at $340 million. And 25 of that or so is related to the assumed contingency, but you start to see it drop off significantly in 28, 29, and 30. At this point, based upon our long-term forecast of energy costs and RA costs and direct costs, we start to see a drop off. What that will translate to is in the about 2/3 of the way down, you can see change in that position. Hopefully you can see. But it's, we're gonna end this year at an estimated 58 million, a budgeted 31 million, which assumes a contingency, but it starts to increase dramatically in the following 3 or 4 years by 62 to 67 million. I want to draw your attention to the last row, which is days liquidity on hand that came up earlier. But our current budget for the FY 27 budget year would have us ending at 128 days. I think it's 130 in the revised one, but I can't remember for sure. And that assumes that we need the full contingency. If we don't, that would be higher. But you also can see is in the following year, you start to get to the end of the 200 days of cash on hand. And both of those years assume a contingency. So if we can achieve this level in FY 27 or better, assuming we don't need the contingency, we can start to see our way to being at the levels that should be able to start having discussions about an investment grade credit rating, which we will start to probably have discussions in the next 6 to 9 months, but probably not looking to achieve one for another 12 to 18 months. And if we can, those days that you'll see forecasted into the FY 29 and last 3 years at 275 to 395 with no changes, probably don't need to be at that level. And so that's part of the reason we have a 5-year look, is that it gives us some view into when we think we'll be able to achieve investment grade credit rating, whether we can sustain it, and whether we could sustain lower revenues from lower customer rates. That's good, because we're in a long-term business that we can't be surprised by not being able to provide energy to customers. We try to maintain a long-term view of where we think we'll be, and it's looking like we should be able to be in a pretty good position in a couple of years. That's my last slide. Unless there are any questions.
All right, are there any other questions or feedback? Yes. Linda. Okay. Are we planning on trying to bring any more cities in?
We're not planning to bring other cities in. We have been, we've had discussions with a couple of people they haven't come to fruition. We 2 times we took in cities before, created quite a financial burden for us. We had the additional load, but we also had to buy energy way in advance, and we didn't have much cash. And it took a while before, once they do come on board, before customers actually start to pay our bills, because when they pay their bills 45 days on average, really after energy. So there's a lot of financial burden doing that. We are in a financial position now where we could entertain that. We're not in any discussions now, and if we initiated discussions, it would be at least 18 months before that service would start. So No, that's, like, I can give you the definitive answer, it's probably, the definitive answer is that it wouldn't be for at least 18 months in.
Hi. Anna, did you have a question?
Okay, I just wanted to ask, you had said that we don't have our opt-down, you had budgeted for many, sounds like, and the opt-down of 144 was how significant. What is the tipping point? Like, when would you expect, that number that would cause concern about destabilizing, because you said we budget for a really large number, we're not gonna need it.
I don't,
Do you remember what you budgeted for?
well, we budgeted for the cost of, about $10 million a year if there was a very significant adoption, which was 10 or 15% of the customer base opting out. We're out of 250,000, we're seeing 150. So that's, I don't even know what that percentage is, but it's a very small percentage. If, I'm not gonna tell you what the number would be before we'd be concerned, but we knew that there was some, especially at the board level, some concern about the fact that our rates were higher than SDG&E, or at least right now. And we wanted to give customers an option. Obviously, when there's only 148 people opted down, there's either aren't aware of it, or they aren't that concerned about it because they're buying better, higher renewable energy than not. But you know, it's also possible that people just aren't paying attention as well.
I think that's it. Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you. Okay, that moves us to item number 3, hydrogen vehicle fueling station.
We don't have any speakers.
Thank you. Thank you. So as a follow-up to the conversation at the end of last calendar year and thinking about the work plan for 2026, one of the topics that was suggested was some research on hydrogen vehicle fueling stations and CEA's potential to serve customers who have hydrogen fuel vehicles. So just as background, hydrogen is a colorless and odorless gas. It is one of the most abundant chemicals in the universe. It's currently used for hydrogen vehicles or fuel cell electric vehicles. So these vehicles help reduce air pollution compared to traditional gas vehicles, because the byproduct is water. There's been limited adoption due to the high cost of fuel cells. One of the benefits is quick refueling. However, there are a limited number of hydrogen fuel stations in the United States, which the majority of them are located in California. So as I mentioned, really the question that this committee had as we thought about the work plan for 2026 was, can CEA buy hydrogen energy and supply it to customers? And should CEA be investing in hydrogen stations? Sorry, the text is a little small here, but as I mentioned, most of the fueling stations are in California. So California is one of the first few states that has actually invested in hydrogen fuel stations and a network of them. The map there on the right are where these stations are located. When we think about the number of vehicles on the road in California, there's a total of 316 million registered vehicles in the state of California. Only 14,000 of those are hydrogen vehicles. Less than 0.5% of total vehicles in California, or registered vehicles in California, use hydrogen. And then there's an opportunity potentially for heavy duty fleets to use hydrogen. We kind of picked a local example here. North County Transit District has a goal to achieve 100% zero emission bus fleet by 2042. There are currently 12 hydrogen buses stationed in Oceanside, and they're working on constructing a fuel station to support these goals. So what is the role or potential role for CEA? Our staff and on our power procurement side particularly have explored avenues to be more involved in hydrogen as an energy source. So we could consider hydrogen to energy electricity sources for future offtake agreements. Another CCA, Lancaster Energy, has really pushed to be at the forefront of this and started a separate joint powers authority called First Public Hydrogen, really to facilitate leadership in hydrogen and also support kind of a wholesale supply chain in California, specifically targeted to transit agencies. And then also CEA could become a member of that JPA, the First Public Hydrogen organization, just to stay up to date on the latest developments in hydrogen and explore some more direct participation. And then lastly, more related to the second option here, there is a core limitation for CEA to explore providing hydrogen fuel directly. The Clean Energy Alliance Joint Powers Agreement strictly defines Clean Energy Alliance's role as electricity provision. So a JPA amendment may be required for CEA to be a direct supplier of hydrogen fuel or funding or investing in hydrogen fueling stations. This is a very brief presentation, but happy to take questions and ask them.
Just off the top, this feels like chasing shadows. It's premature, I believe, monitoring the progress of the hydrogen industry is okay. Maybe someday it will make sense, but there are many ways of putting oxygen and hydrogen in water to get hydrogen. And only using solar is the only one that ends up really being clean energy. As we use fossil gas and so forth in many cases to split the atoms in the water molecule, and we are causing world pollution. And I think that the hydrogen industry is so minuscule now, it's not worth it. At least that way it feels to me, what that's worth.
I agree. So there are currently many natural gas companies, also here natural gas companies are the ones who's interested in. And so that says that, so the burning is so the hydrogen use itself might not cause greenhouse gas, but production process in the burning of the natural gas, that part might put more greenhouse gas. So that concerns me. And also the process procedure. I was told the procedure to produce hydrogen is actually very expensive. And how to maintain, and also how to make it sustainable financially it's also a difficult question. Ordinarily, if just everyone here hydrogen, but many people, the public perception is up. I was told hydrogen bomb. Now, so technology is improved, but it might already be very safe. But that perception is still there. So if we want to really expand the use of hydrogen for the energy source, we have to probably do a lot of public.
Yeah, just a couple of comments. Yes, hydrogen is one of the most prevalent atoms on Earth and the universe, probably. But hydrogen is an atom, and it has a propensity to bond with other atoms, H2O, water. And so splitting that out takes a lot of energy. I've had dealings with hydrogen, used to use it, and for the I work. And hydrogen has the lower explosive limit is 5%. 5% hydrogen with oxygen. So when it mixes with oxygen, you'll get a bang. It won't be hydrogen bomb, but it's just, it's just combustible. Fusion, if I remember correctly, is they use the hydrogen atoms and then they fuse them to create the fusion reaction. So also, the last comment I have is it doesn't exist free state, and by free state I mean the hydrogen atom by itself, not free as in money-wise. It's a free state. But I've seen some research that they believe there's deposits under the crust from hydrogen because of the heat and the pressure. And so, bottom line is, I mean, at this point, kind of expensive to separate the hydrogen from water, because I think you got to use pyrolysis. There's potential, I guess, if you drill, but I don't know if the technology is there to find the deposits, how far you have to go. So, I kind of echo Joe's comments that is, I don't know what the financial aspects of hydrogen fuel source or the cost, but might be a little premature to jump in there all at once.
Right, any other questions? John and then Ann.
Yeah, John Mosier or someone was, I know working with the North County Transit, Caltrans has 200 power trains they're bringing down here next year. And they have more up north that they've been using for some years now and had more on order. Which kind of led to this as being a subject of trying to get ahead of the game down here and find out what it takes to have hydrogen available. And in our country, there aren't very many producers of it. I look around the world and I see many more. I saw something just a couple of days ago where South Korea has an initiative that they're really pushing their use of green hydrogen over there, and some over in Germany. So the idea is to keep an eye on it, get ahead of the game over here, and see actually what it would take.
And Feeney Del Mar. I would echo what Joe said and what others have agreed. CEA is into clean energy, and most hydrogen is not clean. Very small percentage is clean hydrogen. The rest take a lot of energy to produce it, and the energy comes from fossil fuels. So I don't think we should be in favor of doing that. Most cars don't need hydrogen. So hydrogen has certain uses that are important, but they're hard to electrify processes. It's not part of our mission. As we said, our mission is electricity only. So I would be very happy if CBA did not get involved in hydrogen.
Any other comments? Yes. Roger.
Yeah, Roger Davenport, motion side.
I agree with a lot of what's been said too. I think CEA's role in this is that if there are commercial firms that want to produce hydrogen to deliver to cars, we could provide the electricity. Probably the long-term way to do it. Hydrogen going into cars, you know, nowadays with lithium-ion batteries being about 80% around the efficiency, they're probably better to put the electricity into a battery than convert it to hydrogen 60% efficiency and then convert back to the electricity at 60%. It's just not as cost effective. It introduces a lot of the problems in the car, like pressurized hydrogen. So I think though that CEA might be able to, you know, like I say, be involved in producing the electricity that's used to produce hydrolyzed water, hydrogen water, and then it would be a clean process. It's just whether they out for somebody else to do it.
Thank you, Roger. You have a comment? You got all that? Okay. All right, we're moving on to item number 4. These are our subcommittee reports. Assuming we don't have any comments for that.
We don't have any comments.
Thank you. And we have a report included in the slide deck. This is from the ad hoc committee on CEA customer arrearages. And I think we'll start with that report and then follow up with our other 2 subcommittees. So that is chaired by Daniel, I believe. So are you ready?
Yes. So, first off, I'd like to thank my other fellow committee members for helping the report. We had, Tracy from Escondido and then Joe Hood from Fiscal. So I will start off, right off the bat here to do this as quickly as possible. I'll do the presentation of the first 10 pages and Joe has graciously, accepted doing pages 11 through 14. So, a while back I asked for information on arrearages because, I had seen that, you know, there was numbers on arrearages and I started comparing them. And you'll see the first slide up there this is the data that I received from staff on arrearages. There's a couple of things I want to clarify. I had a discussion with Ms. Bird about what the data means. So you'll see the notes on there explain that they're kind of like moving, I'll use the term accounts, but it's not really accounts. The information is provided with accounts, but actually the data is past due or balances, past due balance. So what I'm trying to explain here is that if you look at the data, let's say, for example, Dan Dominguez didn't pay his September bill because it was high from the summer air conditioning, and they paid the October and November bill. However, he's got an outstanding balance that's 91 days. It's not that he's 3 months in arrears, but that he's got an outstanding balance. The same applies for all the other accounts in this comparison. So if you look at the 90 days though, one thing that the outstanding balances, and by the way, I've asked staff to, in the future, when they send me information, label it, you know, outstanding balances. I'm not in the habit of changing other people's data when they submit it to me. So you'll note that the 90-day account category has gone up 46%. It went from 25 to 37,000. 25,000 to a little over 37. Again, you know, I use the term account, but it's really outstanding balance. Keep that in mind. The next slide is this is the raw data that was provided to me by the staff. This broke it down from by city. The original was just a raw data on the account. This one breaks it down, is a little bit more granularity into by city. So, not much to talk about this, it's just information that is provided by the staff, and again, when it's accounts, it's really outstanding balance. So now the next page, is I took the data and I tried to make more sense of the information. And this is where the first statement I said about outstanding balances versus accounts. So I broke down all these totals into percentages. And if you look at the percent of active in arrears, the numbers change when you're looking at just outstanding balances. So not by much that they change, there's a change. More accurate number would be the total accounts. If you want to look at it from the perspective of one of my other slides, which I'll get into as we move on. So you'll see the cities. These are people from a perspective whether it's active accounts or outstanding balances. The main message here is people are struggling with their electric bill. So every city is here. The city with the highest problems with accounts is the city of Escondido, followed by San Marcos, followed by Vista, and then Oceanside, and then Carlsbad, Solana Beach, and Del Mar. So the next slide, I think it's 2 slides, yeah, right there. So this is where I said the percentage numbers change. They're not 100% accurate. I think Ms. Bird pointed out that there's changes. However, the numerical order of the cities remain the same. So if you look at, you substitute the totals, they don't change by much. I think towards the lower end, there's some changes. But again, these are the cities listed with one being the one that highest amount of outstanding balances or problems with their paying their electric bill. And so if you go to the next slide, CEA has taken action on rates. I highlighted some of the stuff they've done this year, the expansion of the availability of super off-peak hours, also on weekends, and then the reduced kilowatt rate for customers in the clean impact fund. That requires opting down. Also, I just made a note there that these rate changes are fairly new. I think they took into being active or took place at the start of the year. And I view these changes as not having fully baked into some of these bills and the rates, people struggling. So you'll see, I'll talk about that more a couple of slides down. So let's look at this data came from the CEA's report, Energy, I think it was Energy. And these are the electrical bill assistance program. You have CARE and FARA, which are income qualified, CARE being the lowest income. The FARA is a federal program that is has a higher income threshold. Then you have the medical baseline, which is discounts for qualifying medical devices. Easy one is like CPAP machines. CPAP machines will qualify you medical baseline, which would lower your cost of energy by adjusting the baseline of your energy. You'll see that CARE is the one that has the highest participation, followed followed by, medical baseline, and then, fair in the program. So, and you'll see that the participation rate falls kind of in line with how the cities were set in numerical order. So Escondido being the one that had the highest issue with, delinquent balances. And so the next slide is payment assistance program. So the previous slide was bill assistance programs and how to lower your rate. These programs are help with actually paying your bill. And even though, you know, people are struggling, it struck me that the utilization of payment plan is really low. And I don't know why that is the case. They're extremely low. Escondido only has a 3.8 participation. The next highest city would be San Marcos, and they only have a 2.8, and then Vista at 3.8, and then the other cities fall into line. They kind of align with the previous slide about the cities that are having issues with paying bills. And the payment program, payment plans are programs like AMP, which is a Arrearage Management Plan, LIHEAP, Low Income Home Energy Assistance Plan. And these are all available. You can find them in the CEA webpage. They will send you over to the SDG&E page, which is where you sign up for the program. An additional plan, I included it, it's not a payment assistance. It's called the Levelized Pay Plan. This you won't find on the CEA webpage. So CEA customers are eligible for it. This you'll find only on the SDG&E website. And what that is, I talked about this before, is they take your yearly energy costs and then they levelize it so that your energy costs are pretty much about the same throughout the year. I know my brother who lives in Texas likes this plan because during the summer, your energy costs can be really high, especially in Texas. It's hot. So it's not unusual to have a $900, $800, even $1,000 bill. And what this does is it averages it out, high months with low months, gives you a lower bill. And the key to it is a bill that is consistent so you can budget for it, not it with all of a sudden a high energy bill in the month of August. So now the main crux of this presentation, the nitty-gritty, is that TEA does a lot of community outreach, and they have messages. The recommendation would be that at the event where cities with high arrearage percentages or cities that are having trouble paying their bills, the focus of the message should be, you know, these are the payment assistance programs and the programs that lower your electric. In addition to the other things that CEA does. The equity building program, EBP, those type of things. Now, events and public forums with cities between the 10 and 14%. This is the middle of the pack of the people or the cities, the communities that have problems with paying their bill. Then the message should be, you know, how to lower your bill and also increasing renewable. And then events and public forums where cities such as Carlsbad, Long Beach, I think Delmar, the message should be on increasing renewable. You can still include the payment programs, that the crux of the message is increasing renewable. There were a couple of notes I put on the side, that, also the recommendations, some states have legalized, small scale plug-in solar. And so to help reduce their bills, California has a couple of bills in the works. They haven't done it. They're getting pushback from the IOU. So at this point, we would recommend, or I would recommend that the CEA just keep an eye on the status of these bills and do a look ahead to see the feasibility using some of these small plug-in solar. A lot of, just, I think the term they use is balcony solar. Whether it is, would work to lower electric bill. And then the other is change in the peak and super off-peak hours. I've seen a lot of aftermarket battery companies, Anchor, Jackery, they started making packs that are for a house. And so with the idea of shifting, load shifting, is what we call it. So you charge the battery during super off-peak hours. And then during the peak hours, which is the 4 to 9, you run some of your appliances to high demand off the battery that you charge during the super off-peak. Which makes sense because a lot of people don't realize that their LED TVs have a lot of power. So, again, looking at the ability to have batteries with a change in the off-peak hours and super off-peak hours can be a way to significantly lower your power. So with that, unless there's questions on slides 1 through 10, I want to turn it over to Joe.
Hold on one second. Joe, you're the other committee though, right? Or is this part of this committee? This next report?
Two committees.
Okay, so hold on one second. I do want to just remind everyone that the ad hoc committee work is building a document and a presentation or whatever to be presented to the board, right? We're not directing staff to do anything because we have to make that presentation to the board of CEA, and then if it's something that they wish to pursue, they will direct. I just want to make sure because staff, we're talking to staff, and we don't want to direct staff. Is that clear? Right? You should be talking to the committee because we're trying to understand what you're recommending and be in agreement in that recommendation this quarter. Everybody got that? Okay, I know we're really early. We'll be doing this again a couple of times before we get to that process. I just wanted to remind everybody how our ad hoc works. So with that, we will go to committee number 2. Correct?
So the first committee.
So the first committee. Okay, go ahead.
Second part.
Part 2.
Hey, thank you. Thanks, Dan and Tracy. Just FYI, yesterday, the House in Sacramento voted for the second time in favor of balcony solar. The next goes to the Senate committee, and at least for the moment, it looks very positive. Lori Davies, who's our local rep here in North Kennedy, coastal area, voted for it. So, yeah. I would like to change the thinking a little bit for a couple of minutes and ask CEA to consider partnering more with your cities and also considering geography as a component in the process of the opportunity to address both climate and also overages people who haven't caught up yet on their bills. From the research that was presented here last session, there's a particular statement that said member cities want single education supported affordability solutions. Yeah? Where can we find some of those that haven't been, defined by some government or whatever? And a clear alignment with local climate goals. So I'd like us to think about how could we do that? What could that possibly mean? And the phase 2 energy programs, this is again from research you all presented. We want to use customer energy use data. We want to understand the potential impact on procurement, financial feasibility, and sustainability, which is another sort of dimension to our thinking about this opportunity. And what I've seen so far when thinking about delinquencies is there's been no mention of using geography. What do I mean by that? The next slide, please. I would ask CEA to partner with your cities to do multiple things. Number one, understand where there is excessive heat in our communities. Where is there a really big time urban heat island effect? And does that overlap with delinquencies, the geographical sense? Now, how could we do this? Understanding heat, well, we can build a heat map of each city. You can do that by putting in headers in cars and driving around on a hot day and using GIS to figure out where this particularly hot place is. In actual fact, when this was done in Reno, the same day, temperature varied in 2 parts of Reno, 23 degrees Fahrenheit. So guess who lives in the 23-degree Fahrenheit hotter place? And guess what their delinquency rate very likely is compared to those people who live in cooler, forested communities within that same city and so forth. You get the big picture. But there's another whole approach to doing this without driving around, just sitting in a computer for a bit. And that is from a company called Nature. They're based in Oregon. They have their products are patented. This is really serious work. They have 3 scores, 3 measures that they define and that they track. One is the nature score, a score of 0 to 100. How much nature is in a community, in your neighborhood, is your address, you can actually enter your personal address or any address in the US, get a score. They also track and have measures for heat island effect. And they also have just added another tool, which is what is the economic value of a tree, a mature tree in the city as compared to in a suburb as compared to in rural areas. So they're looking at the economics of these trees. Now, before I get into the detail here, I'd just like to add that as of this year, California has 2 new laws, SB 1425 and AB 1889. Cities are required to map out the impact of nature and climate within the city. Just a simple summary of what these bills are. They ensure that general plans are updated. It's a requirement anytime a general plan is updated, and was also a requirement to have been done January 1st of this year. I don't know that every city's done it, but nonetheless, the law says they should, they must. to reflect contemporary concerns about environmental justice, that's heat, and fees people can't pay for the energy they need. Obviously, if it's hotter, you need more energy for cooling and so forth. Climate change and biodiversity, making them more comprehensive and forward-thinking. So the state legislature has said every city must do this biodiversity, climate, equity map of the city. Now, using Nature One, I entered my home address, and as you can see, I got a score of 3.8 out of 100. Funny this, I have a friend who lives not very far away, and he got a score of 7, and another one has a score of 5.6. You know, we are too built up. We have too little nature. In fact, now one of the profound things about this score is that you have figured out that for every 15-point increase in score, you end up with 1 year additional life expectancy for the people who live in that neighborhood. So in my neighborhood, you can see it's the ground green area. You could have cities by mapping out, adjacent or contiguous green areas to get a good feel for what the city is. If we got the score to 63.8 instead of 3.8, the life expectancy would be 4 years higher. Now, I appreciate this isn't just all CEA's challenge, but I bet you anything, if you take the delinquencies, the 90-day delinquencies, just start there, enter the data in here, we're going to find neighborhoods that are particularly risky. Now, Vista, where I live, has a process right now where they're doing a general master tree plan update. Where should the trees be placed? Well, using your delinquency data, I think we could partner with each city and say, let's focus our new trees in the areas where there's most injustice, if you will. Doesn't that make a lot of sense? Next. So, as I was saying, map delinquencies, look for neighborhoods, and cooling measures to increase the nature score, like the master tree plan update that this is doing, and that is now required in every general plan update and so forth. And this next slide. The implementation. I'd ask you to have CEA staff partner with each of your cities. Map delinquencies, probably best, easiest with Nature Fund. You could spend again a couple of hours in front of a computer screen. Look for grants for trees targeting equity. By the way, CAL FIRE among other groups provide nature grants. There's the possibility there. And of course, the cities themselves look for ways to reduce costs in at-risk neighborhoods. We now know how to define at-risk neighborhoods in these terms. And reduce costs, especially with delinquencies and nature risk overlay. So those are my 4 slides and a different take on how to deal with delinquencies.
Thank you. Question? Okay, Tracy, are you ready for, I believe, orientation of new community advisory committee members with name? Okay, go ahead.
Yes, it's good name. This is Tracy from Escondido, and our committee has met so far, and that is Paige, Ann, John, and Deborah. And we were supported by Caitlin and Rob for the kickoff meeting. We developed a mission statement that I was going to read to you, but I'm having trouble accessing it at the moment.
Awesome.
So our mission statement is to recommend an orientation process for new CAC members and potentially new board members that includes a dynamic resource document with links to pre-recorded webinars, testimonials, and other resources. And we have begun a draft outline of what that will look like, and it will be something that I mentioned will be dynamic, so staff can easily update it as new resources appear and as things become outdated. And Caitlin has reviewed it and provided some feedback, and we're in the process of digesting that feedback and meeting again most likely and starting to really build it out. In future meeting, we'll report back to you all on what we've come up with.
Tracy and Joe, do you have, you're the chair of the last committee, do you have a report? You don't have to have one, but you
I
have.
have a quick report. With the members of our technology committee is ready. Thank you. So, we have met twice. In our second session, we invited Dave Rosenthal, from the Civil Rights Alliance to come and share his thoughts about what technologies make sense for CEA. What is our committee, and we had a very rich conversation. We finished it with my receiving an action item to begin preparing a presentation. I haven't had time to do that yet, but we are underway and we've been having some, I think, rich conversation. Anybody want to add to that?
Thank you, Joe. I just, before we move on, wanted to make sure that each one of the chairs has received the form for the subcommittees, which includes where you enter the members of your committee, the mission statement for your committee, the recommendations that you're making to the board, and then you can include other data points or we make sure everybody gets that. Okay, so make that email go out after the meeting. Okay, so those are sort of the encapsulate the format that will be presented to the board. So just making sure you'll get that before that time comes, but I want to make sure we put that on the agenda. Okay, with that, we are now at committee member announcements. I do want to remind everyone, this is an opportunity for each one of our committee members to share what's happening in their city, something that they went to, right? It's not anything much bigger than that, but we will start at the very end with Roger, and if you don't have anything to say, you can just.
I'll take the fifth.
This is Tracy again from Escondido, and I'll just say I had a good time with Rob out at the Escondido Street Fair and talking about the different ways to save money on bills and all of that. That's really part of that.
Del Mar has finally started their cap update process. So hopefully within a year or two, hopefully sooner, we'll have a new cap.
And John Mosier, San Marcos. And I was also at the Escondido Street Fair, Rob and Sophia, talking to residents, giving out free gifts. It was fun. I look forward to getting involved in more of the activities like that and learning the outreach and Ron's a great teacher, how he actually goes and starts talking to the people. It's a good icebreaker and it's good training to work with him on these.
Joe, from this, there are many things to say, but one of the most enjoyable in the last time was that I and several other people went to Mission Vista High School just before the school year finished. And we did 8 presentations to 2 classes each, mostly the science classes, about the state of the planet's environment and what we might be able to do about it. And the young folks were just really interested. Just fabulous.
First of all, thank you for the resource information to show. Because there are surrounding city climate and the resiliency commission. It's summer is approaching and the capital is moving. We made a little notice. So we were actually talking about how to define where we are the location that we recommend to plan to implement plans. And so there we, and so there that in the last meeting, we didn't how to do it, how to set it. So you gave me a good tour about the major score. So I just want to bring back to that meeting. Thank you.
Dan Dominguez from Oceanside. Oceanside, we're working on their climate action plan. I'm on this committee, the Oceanside Climate Action Committee, and we're working on setting up some of the Oceanside City Council members. We had one with Mayor Sanchez, one with Eric Joyce, and working at scheduling one with the third city councilman, Steve Fitzgerald.
I just want to apologize for not being around. The whole month of March, I was in Japan and South Korea, where I caught viral pneumonia. I came home and I thought I was going to die in April, so I didn't make it to the April meeting. And I go to the emergency room, which finally they gave me prednisone, and I finally started getting better. But I thought I was going to die. I called my trustee and said, "Here's the cremation services to call when I pass away." I was ready. I never had pneumonia before, and I had both pneumonia shots. So it wasn't like I was a good girl. So anyway, that's why I haven't been around. And I'm really sorry about being late, but the traffic on 5 was the parking lot, and I was coming from Oceanside. So I'm here today. But the only announcement I'd like to make is I just want to make sure that everybody heard about what happened with the I was on the schools committee 2 years ago. And our committee decided that we'd really like to work on something that Clean Earth for Kids is working on, which is no idling outside of the Carlsbad schools. Because the tailpipe emissions can cause asthma attacks, and they hurt you, and it's terrible, right? So I started a campaign, and I went every month for 14 months to the school board and talked to them and got the vice president of the board involved with me, and he was fabulous. And he and I decided we would do a contest and say each school can have a contest and who can do the best sign. And here I thought they're going to come out with some laminated sign and put it up. But every school here a different one. So if you ever travel by any of the Carlsbad schools, drive in as if you were going to drop off your kids and see the sign, because they're all different. One says young lungs at work. Another one says heat pollution out of our breathing air, or whatever. So I took a bunch of pictures and stuff, but I can't even find the pictures anymore, so I don't know where they are. So I'm gonna have to go back and take some more pictures. Anyway, very, very excited about no idling signs at the schools so that they don't breathe better. Thank you so much.
Well, that's great, and we're very glad you're here. I survived.
My birthday.
Yeah, that was kind of a tragic story, but we're glad to hear you're good. I do want to just ask a couple things. I think it would be nice to get the protocol for our speakers, because the speaker like are 3 minutes, they have 2 minutes, whatever we were running by. And also, when they walk in that door, it's something that says you fill it out, you hand it to you, or because if not, we need to add that on there if people show up like that versus walking in. And I accommodated him today, which I think he deserved it, but we just need a more formal protocol if we know somebody's coming to speak. That's just all it's in for. And then the other thing was the impact report is digital, the 5-year anniversary impact report. And I think that's really important for each of us to share on social media. You can do, I don't know, on LinkedIn, so I just share it through LinkedIn. but it's a digital, link that I think is important to share with your community if you haven't already. You don't have to say a lot of stuff about it, but just acknowledge the, growth of this organization over the past 5 years and your role on the community advisory committee or something like that. So I think that would be a really wonderful thing. I do want to congratulate staff for all the work for the 5-year celebration. It was really well done. Really, it was really well done, and I think everyone that was in attendance was really enjoyed their time and got to, converse with staff and our community members and our board members in a more social way, which was wonderful. So I really appreciate including us and, certainly making us feel very welcome there, and that our work on this committee is really contributing to the growth of CEA. So thank you for that. And with that, if there aren't any other questions,
Chair Shane, I just want to committee that there are limitations with respect to social media. You only can't have anybody respond directly or forward things. So first person who does that is good. Everybody else needs to not comment or forward, otherwise you're going to. So just to be clear.
and I think what you're asking is for us not to comment as a line something that's posted, right? Like in other words.
Yes, or forwarding anything within the subject matter jurisdiction of your board. You can have one person report. So it's easy to run afoul of that rule. So if you have any questions about it, just contact.
Yeah, and I know on my board, the boards I'm on, we don't even like it coming from a colleague, right? You don't like it. But I think individually, if you have a social presence, you can probably hashtag your city or call them out, but just say true. I just think getting that 5-year impact report out is really important for people to take the time to read over that and see all the work that CEA is doing. Okay, with that, it is 2:54. I am calling for the adjournment. If there's no other questions, and hold on, our next meeting is July 9th. And wait a minute, that's not, yes, it is July 9th at 1 o'clock. All right, meeting adjourned.